And I just wanted to go back to the red book. In the front, I had a little summary of the things that were important to us that we wanted in our house, and I put it on so that in the front of the book, so whenever I got the collywobbles, I'm a bit nervous, and that's happened a few times. Oh God, why are we doing this? I go back and I read it and I think, of course, that's why we're doing it. Don't lose track.
Oh, that's brilliant. Yeah, you've got to have that place to come back to and remember what is actually driving this. So
yeah.
Oh, awesome. And can I ask you, you joined Home Method, your onboarding form came to us in January as well. So it must have been around all the same time as you choosing your architect and making a call.
Yep, it all happened. So I think I was really interested in the whole idea of the team. I loved learning about the team. I had no idea of the number of people that were involved and who would we use and when. So we went ahead. We've already had the surveyor. We've already had the soil tech people come in and all of that. But knowing those things that you had down, what they do, and even how much is an average cost of those, that was all really helpful. That allays anxiety, I think. Otherwise, it's just so much information. You don't even know you don't know. So as soon as we started it, then we were keen to get started. Being the age we are, it's not like we've got forever, nobody's got forever, but we did have to, get a move on.
So you want to enjoy it, don't you? So
yeah. Exactly.
And have you had any examples, I suppose, of where it's helped you avoid mistakes or just set you up for better decision making in the process overall?
I've thought about that. I mean, I'm not in terms of the decision making. I think, without having some specifics, but I think all the way along we refer back to Home Method, about choosing the architect, even little things like having a separate email account for the people involved in the building has been very useful. That was really useful. And, the interview questions, who's in the team, all of those things have probably, who knows what mistakes we would have made if we didn't have them. It's hard to know. We haven't made those mistakes, so we don't know.
Well, we have had the surveyors sort of back a second time, I think, and like it's sort of, you sort of think, oh, if only I'd thought, at the time. So, but we've got a feeling that we're
on the right,
basically tried to do things as efficiently as possible. And I think we're sort of basically following up steps that will set up the next step rather than having to go back and redo things, mostly, I think. We're keeping a big book with
that's awesome.
Sort of, instead of on bits of paper, which it's been quite.
And we're old school,
useful.
so it's not online, it's in a book, but it means we can take it with us everywhere we go and anything. So when we went to the factory with the builder and saw, we had our book and we were able to write things. When we have a meeting with the architect, we write in. When we, anything, when the surveyor came, then we write it down. And it just means everything is there and we can refer back to it. Sometimes we've written things in there that we've been listening to on a podcast that seems relevant and so on. The podcasts have been fabulous.
Oh, I love it. The paper trail is so important because it's such a long process and involves so many conversations and decisions. You can't possibly hold it all in your head. So,
well, I've also got a spreadsheet on the computer, which I'm always confused with when they are on the grand designs, when they say how much did it cost, blah blah. And I'm thinking, what are they talking about? Just the building, or are they talking about everything, like, fees, this, that, and the other? And I mean, I'm not sure how much it's going to cost, but I'd like to know at the end.
Exactly.
And, so I'm putting down as much as I can of everything, even sort of getting the plans printed and things like that, all the little stuff mostly, and the big stuff. And, I mean,
Well,
it's not really helping with the design so much.
it's control, a little bit of control.
At least we'll know at the end what it did cost.
And I just wanted to go back to the red book. In the front, I had a little summary of the things that were important to us that we wanted in our house, and I put it on so that in the front of the book. So whenever I got the collywobbles, I'm a bit nervous, and that's happened a few times. Oh God, why are we doing this? I go back and I read it, and I think, of course, that's why we're doing it. Don't lose track.
Oh, that's brilliant. Yeah, you've got to have that place to come back to and remember what is actually driving this. So
yeah.
Oh, awesome. Do you want to dive into any questions that you have for me that you wanted to chat about based on where you're at in your project? You were talking initially about the granny flat and your curiosity around that. You want to talk through that?
I think the architect's asking us now how we want to do the granny flat. The granny flat would be very expensive as a passive house build, and the builder has said that to us. And we still want to do it. The architect has suggested that we could possibly have something that was, prefabricated and completed or nearly completed and craned into the site. That's another possibility, though they seem to be largely, there's a lot of steel involved, and in terms of thermal efficiency, maybe to me that seems counterproductive as to, what we're trying to do with the house. Or we could do a kit home. I've even thought we could get a tiny house and, towed in. So we haven't come up with a definitive answer for her, and it's almost in the too hard basket. So have you got any suggestions?
How big are we talking in terms when you say granny flat? What do you want to be in it?
Not the 60 square meters that you're allowed. I think probably, maybe 45 or something.
Mm-hmm.
It's a 1-bedroom place. Would be for one person, really.
Okay. So bedroom, kitchen, bathroom, lounge area, basically.
Yeah. And maybe a little sitting area outside that just could be a courtyard or a covered veranda or something. So not huge.
And do you want the flexibility of it being able to be put in and pulled out, or does that not phase you at all?
No, that was just me thinking, is there another? Maybe that's another possibility, but it was too much. I don't know. We don't want that flexibility.
Yep. And can it be a slab on ground where it's located?
Yeah,
I think so. Yeah, I think so.
Yep.
Is that the cheapest way of doing it?
If it's a flat site, then generally you'll find that's going to be more cost effective than doing piers and stumps and an elevated structure. Also thermally, it'll often rate better as well, based on the orientation as well. But, from that point of view. So has the general kind of conversation between the architect and the builder been that if you get the builder that you're working with for the house to do it, they'll want to do it to passive house standards and it's not going to be cost effective given the size of the project? Has that sort of been the general conversation to date? So you've been looking at other avenues and other builders and other options.
Yeah, we're just trying to keep it within a certain budget.
Yep.
Yes. They both thought that it was going to add too much to our budget. The part of us think, will we stretch it? We can, and this is where it gets a bit tricky because we're selling the house and we don't know exactly what we're going to get for the house. So that will have an impact on what, whether we could stretch our budget to include.
Yeah, it's a bit of a moving feast, isn't it?
So it's a little bit unknown.
Yeah. And does the granny flat, how I suppose, is it a satellite away from the house that's sort of self-contained in a way, or is it something that you want to have some sense of connection with, like in terms of how the design overall of the site works from an integrated point of view? What's the view on that?
We want it to be within sight, and it would be the first thing that you would see when you came down our long driveway into our block of land. So that would be quite good for the person living there, because they have, freedom of access in and out without having to go through past our house. But it's good for us because we get to see them when we're out in the garden and moving around. We had thought of putting it on top of the garage and studio, which sort of makes sense in terms of not using up the garden, but it also then would have loomed over the house, and we're already surrounded by houses, being a battle axe block, and we thought that might cut out a bit of light and make us feel even more overlooked. So we're thinking of popping it up in the top corner so that you could the person living there could just drive in, and that's where their little pad would be.
And so are you then thinking that it's separately metered as well?
Yes, I think so.
Okay.
Yeah, I think so. Well, that would make sense then if we got somebody, if we, had somebody in the community that needed accommodation. It just makes it more flexible for that.
Yeah. And so, yeah, having it as a freestanding building definitely sets that up rather than it being that Fonzie flat approach or the, over the top of the garage. So there are obviously, there's a few different options, and it'll come down to, I suppose, what your quality expectations are and your and the aesthetics. I can imagine that the aesthetics will probably be impactful for you, given it's going to be so visible when you come into your home. So I think that's going to be a key criteria for you. And there can be, because just of the increase of granny flat development and the shifts in council regulations around whether they need to be approved or not, and just this general planning approach that we have to creating more density on existing sites, it can be a bit of the Wild West out there in terms of granny flat builders, which you've probably dipped your toe into the water of already. And so I think finding somebody who is like-minded, and that when you prod, I see that there's a lot of companies out there that will say that they're building sustainably, but if you prod a bit, it's lip service. Yeah. And I think because you're so educated about what sustainability actually looks like and performs like, you're going to be really well armed to have some informed conversations to test the alignment of these companies. In terms of if you went down a prefab route, in terms of the whole thing coming in as one element, the main thing will be to consider if that develops too many constraints for you from a design point of view and from a deliverability point of view. So, but being a battle axe block, obviously looking at the clearance down the driveway, you can generally, if you look at tiny homes themselves, they're generally around that 2.4 meters wide. You can get up to 3 meters and it not be too onerous for transport. But once you start getting over that, you start pushing into needing escorts and things like that to move it from wherever it's been made to your site. And then you have to, of course, look at what's the width and the height, not only from like onto your block, but from everywhere from the factory to your block, because obviously it has to get from one place to another. So just, dealing with an expert, an experienced professional who has been doing this for a while and particularly delivering around your regions, they're going to be across those kinds of things. So I think that the appetite for prefab would be largely because it's going to speed up the construction of it. It's also going to be able to be quality controlled if it's with a good operator inside a location, and it's not going to be dependent on what's going on site. So you're already totally across that with the way that you're approaching the house. So that's not going to be a massive kind of learning curve for you, and it's definitely something to consider. It's not necessarily going to be any more affordable than it being built on site. I found that prefab on a square metre rate is not necessarily a lower cost way to go. Where you get the benefits is that it's faster, quality controlled, and you sort of get that instant result. So I think that if you're not trying to compare an on-site solution price-wise with a prefab solution, but it's more about speed and results, then that can definitely be
that's
something to
interesting.
consider.
I thought that it would be cheaper. It seems cheaper, but often they come,
So
you
that's-
still have to fit them out anyway, don't you?
Yeah, well, you just have to, with them, with the prefab, one thing that you do need to run to ground in terms of understanding and asking questions is who actually manages the installation on site and who manages the installation of all of the services infrastructure on site. So some prefab builders are purely plug and play. And so you have to still put all the footings in, run all the services infrastructure to the location, and they're just basically then bringing in the prefab building, dropping it in and connecting it up. Their builder's license covers the building, but you've got to get somebody else to cover all of the installation of all of the services infrastructure, and they may or may not navigate all of the town planning hoops that you have to jump through in terms of submitting if you do need a DA, your building approvals, all of those kinds of things. So understanding when you're chatting to a prefab builder about what responsibility do they take on, is it from a start to finish, and their builder's license and their project management covers all you satisfying all of those things, or is this something you're going to have to get your architect and existing builders help with to sort of fill the gaps, and are your architect and builder and current builder, like, will your current builder be happy to put parts of this on their license and insurance, and navigate it that way? So there is a passive house prefab. There's a passive house builder down in up from you in the Hunter. I think he's located, and I have a feeling his name's Ewan or Evan Graham, who is doing these passive house pods that are really fantastic little buildings. He's been featured in the design files and a raft of other publications. They're quite compact, so they're more sort of that tiny home sort of size, but they might be worth exploring.
I haven't heard of them.
They're a really
things
lovely
I've
design.
seen haven't been that wonderful.
Yeah.
Really.
Yeah. So they're a really lovely design, and I'll shoot the link to you afterwards, this chat, and I'll pop it in the resources for anybody listening or watching so that they can have a check of it. Because there are some other good operators doing sort of those prefab modular kind of things. Arcula's another one. Who else is there? There's a few. There's Modscape's all the way down in Melbourne, but there are some locals around sort of New South Wales. If you go down the kit option, the only thing for me is that kit ones are always tricky because, again, it's about, as you've identified, the quality of the componentry. So, and whether that's in alignment with your quality standards. So you don't want this granny flat to be the poor cousin.
No, I agree. And the architect is also saying, it needs to tie in, as you say, aesthetically with what we're doing. I mean, we can landscape around it, but it needs to stand on its own not stand on it, be part of the whole, environment, if you like. So, yes, I think it's put it in, we've put it in the too hard basket. There were so many movable parts to it that it became tricky. So it almost sounds like the best way of doing it would be to get our builder to build it. And if it was a passive house, little passive house, that would be nice. But I do like the sound of this passive house pod builder in the Hunter. So we'll follow that up.
Yeah. No, that sounds good. And I think it's interesting insofar as, I mean, you could obviously go the finding a plan that you like and seeing, whether that's a plan that you can use based on their copyright, and then getting your builder to price that.
Yes.
I would think based that, if the builder is doing passive house prefab tilt up, you've got that 1250 module to work with. You could, and you just choose something, a very simple kind of construction. You might find it's not based on your expectations, and when you start comparing what is actually out there on the marketplace
We mightn't
to
save
your
that much
expectations,
money. Mm.
yeah, you might find that once you start actually comparing apples with apples, you're not actually, and then it can be done as the part of the whole project, and you can get proper integration of services, infrastructure, and not have the headaches of navigating two different contracts with two different parties and trying to patch the gaps between, and then not being sure about where the responsibilities lie
It does
between
complicate
projects.
things, doesn't it? And I think it has an implication about whether we go to the the private certifier or the DA. I think that might have an impact on that as well.
Yeah.
So yes, well, that gives us a lot of food for thought. Thank you.
That's my pleasure.
So have we got time to ask you just the other question?
Go for it. Yep.
Because we want the garden, first of all, we want the garden to be manageable, and it's a big block, but we also want it to be integrated with the house, and we wanted to be able to get a lot of it. We were wondering if we should get the landscape designer sooner rather than later. What would your recommendations be? And the only other thing that I wanted to add, which could be a bit tricky, is that the architect is quite interested in landscape designer, and she'd quite like to do it. And I'm thinking I'd rather have someone who was a properly qualified landscape designer. And that's a bit that, I'm normally very upfront about these things, but I'm finding this a slightly tricky thing to navigate.
Yeah, I can understand that. So everything that we've sort of spoken about, and what I'm sensing from you in our conversation, is that the garden is as much a part of this experience of living here as the home itself. And so, I mean, landscape designers and landscape architects will generally recommend that you get them in as early as possible, because then they can create a truly integrated outcome that takes the built design into mind and creates a landscape design that is really well coordinated and integrated with that, and really extends on the themes and the goals of the built design. For you, I think that it becomes even more important, because the garden is such a part of your lifestyle in this home, and because you've got a bunch of criteria about it in terms of it not just being, you spoke about the biodiversity, about wanting to see birds. It sounds like it's because it's a battle axe block, because that's going to bring with it sort of arrival and access and security kind of management that is as much a part of the landscape solution as it is the built solution. And then I think particularly looking at there may be, it sounds like because of the size of the block, it'd be interesting to see if the landscape designer perhaps looks at it and goes, well, maybe there's a little bit of flexibility about exactly where we position the house and the granny flat, and shifting them sort of slightly so that maybe sight lines and things like that are about the way that the garden integrates with those views, the privacy, and still at the same time you're feeling like there's some sense of connection. And I think too, then plant species, overland flow, your drainage solutions, all of that kind of stuff become really important as part of that landscape solution.
We're quite interested in rainwater harvesting and things on site. Talking about sight lines, it's a really funny thing to be in a battle axe block, but we want to be connected with the street, and we happen to be lucky. We've got quite a wide driveway, nearly 7 meters wide, and it's right beside the next door neighbour's driveway, so that makes it very wide. And on the other side of the neighbour is a Catholic church with big circular driveway. So from some points of our block, when we've asked for the house to be placed so that we can actually from front rooms see up out onto the street, and we can see churchgoers, we can see children coming home from school, just a little bit, and it's incredibly important to me. And the other thing I want to do is to build a seat up near the letterbox so that we can sit up there in the sun sometimes and watch the world go by. I don't like the idea of being sort of landlocked,
just locked away from everything. Yeah.
Yeah. So from the street, there will be a site of our place, and from our place, there'll be a site of the street.
Yeah.
So that's a bonus, I think.
Yeah.
Mm.
Well, I think too, it sounds like there's a lovely sense of how you actually do arrive into the block because of the nature of it being a battle axe and because of those view lines. And so to me, that's all, the success of that is largely driven by the landscape solution.
Right.
And so you, of course, as you come down and you start to get more of the building kind of, it's not like where you're on the street and you get to see the street facade kind of all in one hit.
No, it sort of will be unfolded.
Yeah, more revealed to you. Yeah. And so I'd love to see how the landscape designer, and if you, again, interviewing them is just like interviewing the architect. I think that, I've had conversations with the home method members who they've brought the landscape designer in later in the process and they've sort of been in the throes of things and kind of then just handled it a little bit more informally and not got the same kind of results of getting that alignment and that fit. And if you've got an architect who's interested in landscape design, that can actually be hugely advantageous. So if she's willing to kind of relinquish some of the control over it, what I do love about architects who really do think about the landscape and the connection to the ground around them is they then start to think. You can have some architects who don't think beyond the external walls. And so they're not thinking about how levels are going to work from inside to outside. And so they're not thinking about how that connection of landscape's going to help. So the fact that your architect is interested in this stuff, if they're happy to let go and bring you have another consultant that you work with collaboratively, it could be really exciting because you'll get that expertise of each of those disciplines, because again, the landscape designer is going to also have to understand how the builder's working, the order of things too, about, when do we start actually, how do we work these levels? How do we reuse the dirt that might be coming out of it for the slab on site so that you're not having to take all of that away and pay for that expense? All of those kinds of things can be thought about from a design point of view, from a building planning point of view, from a budgeting point of view, and work really well. So it could be a really, really exciting collaboration that you see come to fruition when you get the right people.
That's exciting. And do you have any advice about landscape architects versus landscape designers? This is an area I don't know very much about. I sort of understand a bit more about architects and designers in terms of training. What about in the landscaping world?
Yeah, it's quite similar actually. So landscape architecture is a university degree. It's 4 years from memory, and it is a lot about it is a very rigorous degree, and landscape designers have a different level of education. So there's 2 really good podcast episodes in season 4 of the podcast. One is an interview with Luke Jones, who is a landscape architect. One is an interview with at the time it was Sticks and Stones, but they've since changed their name, that are landscape designers. And just in hearing them both talk about how they approach it, you can hear the difference of how landscape designers and landscape architects can work compared to each other. I think it's really going to be about what you're ultimately seeking in terms of, are you largely looking for a really creative approach to how the overall landscape design works? Some people are more looking for, they just want plant specifications and they want to know how, where they're going to be able to locate rainwater tanks and those kinds of things. So, and again, like every other industry, same thing as architects and designers, you'll have people who are really good at what they do and it won't be linked to what their profession is. So I'd encourage you, the same process that you went through to find the architect that you have, and you've obviously done a really good job and found a really good fit, follow that similar process with looking for the landscape designer or architect as well.
I won't have the questions, or could I use the same?
I think you'll find a lot of them will still apply. Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So
that's a good idea.
Yeah.
Oh, well, I've got form now. I can do that.
The big thing is that they're happily all conversing and communicating with each other, because sometimes in the process, I've watched some designers just try and silo it and just sort of, the architectural drawings, for example, just get handed over to the landscape designer to then work with. And that feedback loop doesn't come back in. And you might find, depending on where you are in the process, but you did talk about the fact that you're doing this sort of C-shaped design and you've got the veranda, but, looking at how do you step off into the landscape where you do, and how do you bring built elements into the landscape? Are there destinations where you want to go and sit and look back at the house? You talked about that, seat up the front on the street, but equally you might find that based on the block and your experience of the block, there's little pockets that you want to have as satellite experiences away from the home, that have a particular kind of feel and environment about them because of the way that the hardscape is, or the softscape, or the planting arrangement, or perhaps you can hear, you've got a water feature or something like that. So thinking all of those things through becomes really exciting to make sure that you're thinking about the block from boundary to boundary, not just from the external walls of your house. So.
Okay, and we need them to be able to work together with the architect. I guess that there has to be a fit there, but hopefully if we pick a good one, then they'll be all professional enough to work together.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's the main thing, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you very much.
That's my pleasure. Did you have anything else before we wrap up?
I don't think so. Have you got anything, Len?
No.
I think we've covered a lot.
Yeah.
It's awesome.
It's been very good as usual.
It's been such great conversation and so lovely getting to meet you both in person or on Zoom and have this conversation. I've loved hearing more about your project. I've of course seen your questions in the Facebook community along the way, but I love having these conversations to be able to really dive into the details. And I look forward to getting you back on at some point in the future to give us an update.
When we've moved along, yes,
to hear where you've got to. And I just wish you the very best. It's just so exciting to think what you're creating for yourself, not only the beautiful place that you'll get to live, but the lifestyle that you get to lead in it and those that you share it with. So I'm really, really looking forward to it. And I thank you so much both for being here and making the time to share so generously with us about your project. So thanks so much.
It's always uplifting to listen to you.
Oh, that's very kind of you.
That's what Landon said. Whenever we've had a little bit of, nerves, Landon said, I think we need to go and listen to Amelia because you calm us down, voice of reason. Okay, so thank you for letting us be part of it.
That's my pleasure. Think of me as your personal cheer squad. So
yes, that's right, exactly. Okay.
Awesome. Thanks so much.